Hello, everyone. Welcome to day 2 of the NACTO 2015 Designing Cities Conference. Let's try again. Good morning. Good morning. Oh, it always works. It's great. Okay. I'm so excited to see such a great crowd here today. We got another great day of programming lined up. I'm just here to kick it off. Again, I'm Linda Bailey, and I'm so excited to see we have a crowd of 650 people, for those of you who haven't heard yet. Let's give ourselves a round of applause. Yay. And so I'm really excited you're all here to meet each other and learn from each other and learn from a lot of the great stuff that's going on around the country and especially here in Austin. And to introduce today's events, actually I'm going to be introducing Ed Reiskin, our president, who's going to come up. For those of you who don't know Ed, he's been a leader in this field for a long time. He's at the San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency, and he's leading a truly combined multimodal agency with transit and roads underneath it. And it's a really exciting program that he's been putting out for several years now and over there, and so glad to have him as our president at NACTO. Why don't you come on up, Ed?
Thank you, Linda. Good morning, everyone. It's on behalf of the Board of Directors of NACTO, I want to join in welcoming you all here to Austin. What a tremendous place to be, and what a great purpose to be here for. It's a great honor to be able to serve as NACTO's president, to be able to be a part of NACTO. And I was thinking about, so what is it about NACTO that makes it so powerful? And first, you've got great leadership from Linda Bailey as our executive director, and a tiny but powerful team of NACTO employees who are extremely talented and amazingly prolific, that are doing just tremendous work that looms much larger than the tiny staff of 12 that is NACTO. And one of the reasons why it looms so large is because part of what NACTO is and does is it's not just an organization of 12 people. What it is it's leveraging and supporting and facilitating and harnessing the work that all of you are doing, that all of we are doing in cities across the country, across North America, now across the world. And that really is what, to me, the power of NACTO is. That's what makes NACTO special. And so it's not just an agency. NACTO is really a movement. And it's one that has caught the attention of elected and appointed officials at all levels of government, of key stakeholders outside of government. And it's a super exciting time in cities, in transportation, and particularly where those two come together, the recognition of the role that transportation plays and needs to play in making our cities safer, better places to live, more vibrant, more equitable. That's the work that you all are doing every day. Bringing it all together is why we're here. The conference each year for me, Designing Cities Conference, is kind of the pinnacle of activity for NACTO. It's where all of that energy and excitement and enthusiasm comes together for a few days, bringing people from across the country, across the world together to share, to engage. And I do encourage for those, the many of you who've already been here, you already know this. For the rest of you, you're really in for a treat these next couple of days. I do encourage you to as much as you possibly can, to engage. Like many other things in life, the more you put into it, the more you get out of it. I encourage you to talk to people from other cities that are here. There's probably not too much that any one of us are facing in our jobs that somebody else in the room isn't also facing or has faced. And it's not that there are easy, quick answers out there, and it's just a matter of finding the right person and getting the answer. But there's a lot that we can do to learn from each other's failures, to build off of each other's successes, to develop new solutions together, and that's really why we're here. So I encourage you to take advantage of that, to take advantage of what's happening both inside the building and outside the building. We have a beautiful city and a beautiful setting for this conference with a lot of great stuff to see. And learning happens not just in the rooms in here, but out there, but also really in the connections that you make. So I hope everyone leaves here feeling as energized and motivated and inspired and as enthused as I have for the last 3 conferences I've attended, so that we can all go back to our cities and continue the great and noble work that you all are doing every day. So just want to express my enthusiasm that we're here again. I want to thank the NACTO board and particularly the staff for all their work to put on this concert. And I want to acknowledge and thank the people from the city of Austin for their work. We hosted it in San Francisco last year. I know it's a lot of work to make one of these happen, and the folks here in Austin, as we can see already, have done a great job. And we actually have a kind of special acknowledgement for Austin, and not because they're the host, but because they have the distinguished honor of being the first NACTO city to graduate, as it were, from affiliate member status to full member status. And they did this because, according to the NACTO bylaws, they have hit a population threshold that catapults them into full member status. So I would like to ask you to join me in welcoming the Director of Transportation for the City of Austin to accept the honor upon his graduation. Please join me in welcoming Rob Spillar. And here we have our first ever diploma, I guess it is. So thank you very much to the folks of Austin, and congratulations.
Wow, well, thank you very much. For any city that wants to follow us, just know your diplomas will be smaller since we're Texas. Ours are always bigger, just so you know. Anyway, I commented earlier as I was talking around the table down here, I've now hit the point where I actually have to put readers on, so please pardon me for adding to my accoutrements here. So welcome to Austin, by the way. I know that our mayor said welcome the other day, but I want to express that as well. We are so proud to host the NACTO Designing Cities 2015 conference, and we're truly honored that each and every one of you are here. You all represent the brightest minds in transportation and city building and community development. I trust you'll be inspired by hopefully what you learn here and what you see on our streets. I know we have much to learn from you. But seriously, that's one of my favorite sayings, is that few great things in city building and mobility happen anew. Many things we steal from other people. And that's great because we can use each other as inspirations, as muses for really great things to help our citizens and visitors to this community. We had an exciting few years implementing everything from transit priority lanes in our downtown, as you'll see on Guadalupe and Lavaca, to shared use paths. Hopefully some of you will be riding or walking on those today. I know some of you may have taken the fun run this morning around the lake. I watched you. I'm exhausted from watching you. But seriously, our bike program, we have doubled our bike lanes and are now enjoying a boost in bicycle ridership as much as 5.6% mode split in some of our central city neighborhoods. And we're willing to try anything. We actually have Google cars operating in the city, so if you're behind a small car with a doohickey on top and it's acting on its own, please don't be frustrated. It doesn't understand what a horn is, so don't honk. It doesn't help. Just last year, we adopted both a complete streets policy and we updated our bicycle master plan. 2 years ago, we adopted a new comprehensive plan, and we're on our way to developing a new strategic mobility plan and approach to building cities. We reuse our streets here in Austin regularly. We sponsor or facilitate about 150 special events a year, everything from marathons to pumpkin patch parties on our streets. And so we balance the use of our streets for both community as well as mobility. We're learning how to harness data, big data, to truly better our transportation system And we're diving into the deep end on intelligent transportation system technologies, investing heavily in the next generation signal system and data collection systems so that we can make real-time changes in our mobility management systems, both on our highways as well as our arterials. And we hope here to approach it from a one-system approach and integrate what I believe for the first time, highway operations and arterial operations in the state of Texas, sort of a diversion from our traditional balkanization of our mobility systems here in Austin. You'll find we not only have a department that's traditionally thought of as a highway department, Texas Department of Transportation, but we have a separate organizational mobility authority that manages the roadways if they become toll roads. We have transit agencies, we have city governments managing roadways, and we have counties, which basically means most of our job is herding cats in terms of seeking a common outcome. But the reality is, as quick as we make investments, our city is outpacing us. What a great problem to have. Economic growth, it's boomtown here in Austin. If any of you guys are in need of tower cranes and can't find them, they're probably here in Austin. I've heard politicians refer to the tower crane as the state bird of Texas. Well, it has landed here in Austin. At one time from my office, I could count something like 20 plus tower cranes actively working. And so what that comes to is, so what does that mean? You know, Jeff Tumlin in his book talks about two types of towns, towns that are struggling financially and so people complain about the lack of jobs, and boom towns, if you will, economic success stories where the common discussion is about traffic congestion. And so really, if you think about it, congestion is the symptom of many of our challenges around the country. It's not the root cause often being activity. As I think Yogi Berra would have said, you know, nobody goes there anymore because it's too crowded. It's a good economic problem to have. Everybody wants to be in Austin, and many of our cities that are growing, it's the same way. We have about 110 people literally moving to our region every day. I have to be careful about that. One of our local reporters PolitiFact that on one of our politicians who had said 110 are moving to town every day, but really to the region, because we have to think regionally. Austin has grown to a point where we're now able to be full members of NACTO, but the reality is we are surrounded by garden cities or suburbs, one of which is in another SMSA, which is trades places with the Austin Round Rock SMSA, which we're a part of, as the fastest growing metropolitan area in the country. And so literally as this region grows into a mega region, maybe joining with San Antonio, Dallas, and Houston someday, that's hard to believe, we have to think about how we want to develop as a community. Do we want to lose all of our identity as our towns grow together, or do we want to preserve that identity and wonderful places to be? We're eager to be new full members. We look forward to the responsibility, but also to the opportunities. You know, we think of NACTO as a real resource, and we're honored to be full members, and thank you for that. I know a lot of that was due to just our multiplication capabilities, but we're really excited about that. And we're excited to bring our perspective, because we do bring a total mobility perspective to how we're dealing with the growth of our city and the success of our economic situation here. You know, I said earlier, congestion is just a symptom of the underlying challenge. We are engaged in a discussion right now, contrary to what a lot of people believe here in town, that congestion is really not our challenge. Our challenge is how do we get workers and people to the next 40, 60, 70,000 job spaces building right now in our activity centers here in downtown when all of our gateways to town are full. And I'm sure that's a similar situation that many of you guys face. You know, as technicians or professionals, we have to address the need to reduce congestion, make people's lives better if we want to keep our jobs. But the reality is it's the underlying problem or challenge or hurdle or success that we're all enjoying is urban places. And as the U.S. becomes more urban, we need to think about urban solutions. We can't forget about the rural needs because we know most of our legislatures are controlled by the rural populations or the rural legislators. But we have to start thinking like urban centers, much like Europe has for thousands of years. And so that's what we look forward to about being part of the National Association of City Transportation Officials, focusing on urban solutions, urban benefits, urban environments, and urban success stories. So thank you for coming to Austin. Again, we look forward to stealing great ideas from each and every one of you, and hopefully you can take some back from Austin. So thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Hello. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me now?
Oh. That's better. My name is Aman Batheja. I'm transportation reporter for the Texas Tribune, a statewide news organization based here in Austin. I want to thank our panel for being here. This is a perfect panel to talk about transportation issues and redesigning cities. To my left is Rob Spillar, director of Austin's Transportation Department. He has previously worked for the engineering and design firms Parson Brinkerhoff and was director of traffic management for the city of Seattle. Next is Rebekah Scheinfleld, a commissioner of the Chicago Department of Transportation. She has previously held leadership positions with the Chicago Transit Authority and the New York City Parks Department. Next is Crissy Fanganello, current director of transportation for the city and county of Denver's Department of Public Works, and she's also currently secretary of NACTO. Next, we have Leah sorry about that, director of Portland Bureau of Transportation, previously held leadership positions with the DOTs in Chicago and Washington, D.C. And last but not least, Ed Reiskin, director of transportation, San Francisco Municipal Transportation Agency and president of NACTO. Thank you all for being here. I watched the video of this panel at last year's conference, and I am just going to shamelessly steal the first question. Cheryl Jennings asked a great question I just thought was a great way to start. How do you all commute to work in the morning?
You want to go in line? Well, I drive a smart car, and I have purposely chosen where I live so that I can avoid congestion.
Oh, that's smart.
I take the Chicago L, the elevated rapid transit. I live a block from the line that I can take right into the loop, and I can be 20 minutes door to door. So again, I've purposely chosen to live near transit-rich environments.
You know, it's funny that you decided to ask this question because I've been thinking about it since last year, just in case I had to come up here and talk about it. And I want to answer it really honestly. I think for me, transportation and the way I get around depends on the season. When my kids are in school, I move differently than when they're not in school, and because I value that time with them and making sure I can spend time with them. So some days I drive my electric vehicle, which is better but not perfect. Other days I ride a bike. I don't usually take transit because it takes longer than it does to drive or ride my bike.
I purposely, again, chose where I lived to not for density, but for topography in Portland, because I ride my bike. Our whole family rides our bikes everywhere, so I ride my bike every day, and on the occasion that I have an extra bit of time in the morning or the evening, I walk.
And I chose where I live because I was worried that someday I'd be on stage and someone would ask me, how do I get to work? So fortunately, I chose to live in a place that's transit accessible. So I take Muni, which is San Francisco's transit system, which my agency manages. I take that to work every day.
Well, and so, you know, you all represent 5 very different cities, and you were talking about stealing ideas from other cities, but you know, Chicago is I think more than 4 times bigger than Denver, and Portland and San Francisco see very different weather patterns than you would see in Austin. I'm wondering, how do you try to promote active transportation, like, you know, walking and biking, and what in your cities makes it more challenging or perhaps easier? And I was hoping to start with Rob. How is Austin trying to promote active transportation, and what maybe do you have to deal with that other cities don't?
Well, I think our major strategy is to make sure, over the past, has been to make sure that we develop safe, accessible infrastructure for all users and all abilities. And so that's what you see in terms of our bike lanes, our dedicated bike lanes, our trail system that we're rolling out. And you have to understand, 7 years ago we had very little infrastructure. And so as we roll it out, we find that people are using it. And so a good example is South Congress, where before we remodeled South Congress with bike lanes and changed the parking, we had almost no one using cycles on that corridor. And within 2 weeks, I was down there and saw a whole family, little kids and trailers behind bikes, using that corridor. And so I think that's very gratifying. We've now shifted to education programs. We're continuing the infrastructure, but now we're focused on things like B-Cycle, so that people in their automobiles see people riding bikes not wearing Lycra. They're wearing suits and dresses and stuff. And that's important because there's a tendency in this town to think that all people riding cycles are out for recreation. Yet when you ask them about a Winnebago or something on the road, they think that's going to work. So trying to help people understand that a lot of people rely on bicycles to get to work and to play and to do everything else that people in cars do too. And so that's what we're focused on, and it's having a big positive effect in that some of our neighborhoods boast as high as almost 6% mode split by bicycle for work. So that's pretty cool.
How does Chicago compare?
So similarly, in terms of our sort of overall arching philosophy, in terms of thinking about giving people great options for transportation and having a robust transportation network that gives people efficient, affordable, safe, accessible options. Chicago is very flat, but it's also very large in terms of our geographic spread. And so that's a big challenge. We also have a lot of weather variability throughout the year. So we're really pleased that we've seen growth in our mode share of active transportation choices. We're over 40% now in terms of how people are getting to work on a daily basis, 40% not driving, so they're using transit or they're biking or they're walking. And so that's really encouraging, and I think it reflects the strides we've made in providing people good options. And that's thinking about the connections also between modes and the facilities that folks can use. So whether it's from the micro of investments in the pedestrian infrastructure to ensure safe passage to and from transit, or investing in biking facilities. In just 2 years, we've started one of the biggest bike share systems in North America now. In terms of the number of stations that we have, we're the largest now, and that's a huge win, but it's also an ongoing challenge to continue to grow that network so that we can reach more parts of the city. And that's been a great complement to our the backbone of our transit system in terms of that last mile problem at either end where people are taking the train or the bus. We're also making big investments in our transit network and facilities, so both on the rail as well as in terms of our bus facilities, and trying to hit at the nerve center of that by making some major investments right in our downtown and our CBD. So thinking about how people are moving across the loop once they're coming in from the commuter rail or local buses or express buses, and then that last mile connection, because it's those lack of connectivity issues that often dissuade people from using active transportation options, and instead they're driving. So really trying to prove to people that there are good and efficient options that are more affordable and in many cases faster, so that they start to experiment with that, and then we see that shift growing.
For Denver, we did our first bicycle master plan back in 1993, and we've been slowly sort of trying to figure out how do we build the system. But it wasn't until we finished our most recent plan, the Denver Moves plan, that was in 2011, where that we actually started to build a program. So before that, it was sort of one engineer trying to work something in every once in a while. But since we created our big picture vision and started to actually implement that vision on an annual basis, we've made a huge strides over the last 5 years. complemented by the first bike share system in the country, which was Denver. It's not the biggest, but it was the first. And they're doing a great job. And how do we tie all these things together? I think similar to what Rob had to say in terms of how do we make sure that active transportation, people moving around on bikes, is not just about the Lycra set, that we are regular people on bikes. And I think that's a big challenge that Denver has. We are already a very active community. We enjoy, while we have cold weather, we also have 300 days of sunshine a year. So it might be chilly, but it's sunny out. So those are all things that we're working on. I think one of the biggest struggles we have as we get into more highly protected, bicycle facilities and things of that nature is how do we make sure we can maintain them, particularly in the wintertime with snow. So that's a big challenge, and it's something we've been working on for the last couple of years, but it's unique to some of the other cities.
Leah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Portland is about to get its bike share system. Is that right? Which I was just amazed. If I had to guess which of these cities didn't have a bike share, I would have not guessed Portland.
Yeah, right. But I will say there are going to be some advantages to being the 65th city to adopt a bike share program. We are going to be rolling out an incredibly, what we think is going to be the most green, sustainable, innovative bike share program in the country is our hope. So. But to get to your question, in Portland, we really, in terms of providing infrastructure, we really focus on providing comfortable and safe infrastructure for people to choose to walk or bike. And we have a very robust neighborhood greenway program. So there are streets around the city that have a lot of traffic diversion off of them to keep cars off, and they're set at 20 miles an hour, and they're meant for pedestrians and cyclists. So it's a very robust network throughout the city. I think we have over 300 miles of greenway networks. And we also have a really robust Safe Routes to School program. So we're in all of the elementary schools in the city of Portland. This year we expanded into middle schools. Next year we hope to go into high schools. And the point is to teach kids how to get to school in an active manner. And when you can intercept kids, you're teaching them habits for the rest of their lives. So we hope that it sticks with them, and these are patterns and habits that develop. And we also run a really robust TDM program. So we try to get people when they're in a moment in their life where they're making a big life change. It's also when they're most ready to make a change in their transportation decisions. So we do a really robust TDM outreach. And we also have a very robust Sunday Parkways program. So for 5 months out of the year, for a Sunday every month, we shut down a big stretch of roadway in the city, and we're now up to more than 25,000 participants at each event. And it's really meant to show people that you can get out, enjoy our roadways, walk, bike, roll in a really low-stress environment, and see that people who aren't wearing Lycra can get out and be active and enjoy.
So I think much the same story in San Francisco. What we have going for us is that it doesn't get hot, it doesn't get cold, we don't have snow, we don't have humidity, and thanks to, I think we're in year 4 of what's become a pretty devastating drought in California. It pretty much doesn't rain anymore. So in terms of being able to be outside and walk and bike, I was going to try to get through this without using the word Lycra, but I guess I just did. But you can dress like this and comfortably walk or ride around the city. We do have hills, which maybe a little bit works against us, but really what we're focusing on, like I think we heard from all the other cities, is making it more attractive for people to get around on foot, on a bike, or on transit, because transit trips, as we all know, kind of connect with and encourage active transportation as well. So one of the ways that we're trying to kind of lead in making it more comfortable, to make it a better option for people, is through Vision Zero, which we adopted last year. For us in San Francisco, it's a goal to eliminate traffic deaths by 2024. And so a lot of the investments that we're making, a lot of the education that we're doing is around making our streets safer. And that's really, I think, the first step towards making it more attractive for people to choose ways other than their own car to get around. But we have been investing in infrastructure, using a lot of the good work that's come out of the NACTO design guides and really putting it into practice in the city. Cycling is our fastest growing mode of transportation. And like the other cities, bike share has been kind of a good story for us. We currently have fewer than 400 bikes in the city. Within a couple years, we'll have more than 4,000. So we're doing a very significant expansion in a very short period of time to get some of that last mile linkage, that transit linkage, and looking to continue to grow the mode share, make it easier for folks to get around the city using or wanting to use their car really only as the last resort.
You mentioned Vision Zero, and it's kind of a fascinating campaign that I'm hearing about in the past few months. But I'm wondering, what do you do to actually reduce those deaths? And I'm wondering if what's changed in the past few years that's making it perhaps more challenging. In Austin, I know I just see everyone crossing the street looking at their phones, which seems to be a big problem. And also, you know, there's the rise of Uber and people using cars more than perhaps they would have a few years ago just to go short distances. So some of you could talk about Vision Zero and what you're doing to try and reduce traffic deaths. Anyone who feels free to jump in.
I'll jump in.
Sure.
Portland just... Can you hear me? Oh, there we go. Yeah, Portland just became, there's only 10 cities in the country right now that have adopted a Vision Zero philosophy. Portland is one of them, and we just did it very recently. And the things that, you know, we're in our nascent phases of trying to roll this out, but we're going to really focus on education in the first phases, because people need to be educated about how people are getting around and understanding the built environment. We are going to be looking at changes in enforcement. It's in many jurisdictions, Chicago and DC included, there's photo enforcement is a really strong component of reducing serious injuries and fatalities. I mean, the overwhelming majority of crashes, whether they're serious injuries or fatalities on our roadways, are due to impaired driving. So if we can help reduce impaired driving, we can see a reduction in traffic fatalities. We're doing a strong rollout of increased pedestrian improvements. There is a stubborn statistic of pedestrians deaths are increasing or holding stable nationwide. So, and we're also seeing pedestrian fatalities are occurring with more frequency in low-income communities and communities of color. So we're spending a lot of money on sidewalk infrastructure, crossing improvements, and again, investing more into safe routes to school to educate families on how to travel safely throughout the city. You know, there's one of the interesting questions that I struggle with and don't really have the perfect answer to is there's the pushback on Vision Zero of you're never going to get to zero, so why would you adopt such a campaign? And we can't support this because we can't get to zero. And our city council did not approve a timeline to implement Vision Zero because they didn't want to have somebody come back 10 years down the road and say, you said you're going to get to zero and you didn't. But the response that I've come up with and the way that I'm trying to guide this through my bureau and through the city is that you have to have big goals to achieve things, and you have to have big goals in order to set performance metrics in place. I feel like I keep going on and off. You have to set these performance metrics in place to get to a goal, and we may not get there, but if you don't set out to achieve that, you're not going to make progress. So we're currently working to bring in sister agencies because transportation departments are not going to achieve Vision Zero on their own. We need the support of our police partners. We need the support in our schools. We need the health department to join us. So it's going to take a lot of people in the tent, and it takes a lot of time to get those lobbying groups together to make it successful. So we're really excited about the progress that we've made and what we're going to be able to do in the coming years. But you know, it's going to take baby steps, I think, to get there in a large coalition.
Yeah. And I would add, I think where Leah ended was it's a mind shift. And you know, for decades now, we've been just accepting that people are going to die in our streets. And I think nationwide, it's something like 35,000 people die in traffic collisions each year. In our city, we about 30 people die every year in our streets. And what's happening in a lot of our cities is with crime coming down, we're at a point where more people are being killed by cars than by guns in many of our cities. And I think that the mind shift is people saying we're no longer going to just accept that people have to die just trying to get around the city, trying to get to work, to school, to wherever they want to go. So I think it starts with almost like a psychological or paradigm shift. And then it's kind of the mechanics of it. It's redesigning the streets to make them safer, to make it less likely that a mistake will result in a serious injury or fatality. It's enforcement, education. We're spending a lot or investing a lot of effort in education, and we're undergirding it all with data, using a very data-driven process, looking at collision histories, looking at where they're happening, why they're happening, what the primary collision factors are, and then looking at particularly what countermeasures are effective in addressing those specific collision factors, using the data to drive our outreach and education, using the data to drive our enforcement. And like Leah said, it's not just a transportation department effort. It's bringing in many other city agencies. We're actually, one of the lead agencies for us is our Department of Public Health, because just like gun violence is a public health issue, street violence, traffic violence is a public health issue. So bringing together lots of folks from across the city and county, as well as stakeholders from the outside, to achieve and realize this mind shift that's necessary for us to get to zero.
Well, in Chicago in 2012, we adopted our version 0 and 10, but same challenges and opportunities. And I personally would like to do a lot more in terms of changing the conversation. I think we're still in Chicago, unfortunately, too narrowly thinking about it in terms of as a transportation issue, and we're really working to broaden those set of partners, public health, police, et cetera. And just to add to especially what Leah and Ed were saying, broadening the discussion about the impacts beyond fatalities. Those are tragic, but it's also about the toll it takes on our economy, on our individuals with serious injury, and other types of economic impacts from property damage. So even if relative to, let's say, homicide rates or something, the fatality number is not that high, when you broaden the perspective to think about serious injury and other property damage from traffic crashes, it starts to change the tone and the magnitude of what you're talking about, the negative impact on our economy, on the quality of life, and personal relationships and families. Really, you start to see that. And so that's an important part of the dialogue, too.
So Denver wasn't the first, but we might be the 11th. So we've been working really hard over the last, safety's always been an important issue. It's not like it's just coming to the forefront. And I think that's important for everyone to understand. But safety is really starting to drive us differently in terms of how we think about our roadways and our networks and how people are moving around. So we've had the benefit of watching the other cities kind of start to announce their Vision Zero plans and what they're doing. We actually proud to announce here this morning that Mayor Hancock has in his budget funding for us to develop our Vision Zero action plan. So we'll be working on that in 2016. Yeah, we're really excited. We've started some of the background work. We've done some analysis in terms of where we have crashes in our city for both pedestrians and bicycles. It's really great work for us to help understand where do we need to make a difference. We're also learning from everybody in terms of the other departments, the other organizations that we need to get into the conversation, so we have that benefit as well. When we went to senior administration to talk about this idea of Vision Zero, I wasn't sure how they would go. You know, it's hard. It's a big, wildly audacious goal, 0. But what else would you say? 10? 10 of you are expendable? And I was really pleased when I went to senior leadership that what they said, what they liked about it is that it was so clear. It was so clear, and they loved that. And so they said, let's run with it and let's go. So be on the lookout. We'll be working on some more stuff next year. The other thing I wanted to mention, too, just before I hand it over, is one of the things I loved, and Portland has done this, and I've stolen it from you all, is what's the role of the community in all of this as well? And everyone travels differently in different cities. And I've watched the behavior of folks, and I see people with bad behavior in terms of being distracted, looking at their phones, as you mentioned. People stop here and wait for you to go as a pedestrian, even though there's a right-hand turn that's easy to make. And we don't have that culture in Denver right now. When I talk to even our bicycle and advocacy groups, I've been asking 3 questions over the last couple of years since I've been in this position. I ask if they would like a walkable Denver, and everyone says yes. And then they ask if they would like a bikeable Denver, and they all say yes. And then I ask if they drive the speed limit. And all the hands in the room generally go down. And that was true when I asked a group of folks that are bicycle and pedestrian advocates. So we all have some personal responsibility in this, and while we can do a lot from an infrastructure standpoint, and the cities can certainly do more from an education standpoint, we have to also demand it of our community that they respect each other and move around our communities with respect for each other.
Rob, I'll give you a chance to talk, but I just want to ask Crissy, I'm just curious, has the legalization of marijuana led to problems with more impaired driving or more accidents? Or
You know, I have no idea. I would have to ask my police department. I haven't seen any data.
it hasn't been pronounced at least
No,
then.
I don't
Okay.
think so.
I mean, I think
Just wondering.
Oregon, legalized marijuana as well, and we get asked that question already. And I think what you're going to see is the continuing statistic that the overwhelming majority of injuries and fatalities are due to impaired driving.
So talking about Austin has also adopted a Vision Zero statement. Safety's always been on the minds of transportation engineers and professionals, and I think if you talk to our police department, they'd always say that safety's an issue, but one thing that we haven't been able to achieve until just recently is really a cross-the-aisle discussion between the enforcement and the engineering. And something you said, it comes up in the discussion of marijuana, but Jimmy Kimmel said it best about Austin. Austin, we have a drinking problem. Half of our accidents involve alcohol, and that's not just the drivers, but half of our pedestrians that are killed are also alcohol is a contributing factor. Used to, we said, don't drink and drive. I mean, don't travel and drive kind of is not as a catchy statement, but that really is the issue. I mean, a big chunk of our safety need for education here is also about personal responsibility, about, okay, if you're going to party, that's one thing, but you're putting yourself at risk. And so I think as we unfold our Vision Zero here, and it's still very much in the formative stage here in Austin, a lot of the incidents that result in fatalities or serious injuries here in Austin often are not engineering related or device related. They're related to high speeds, and I'm intrigued by this set of questions that you just ask of people. I don't think just changing speed limits will necessarily change behavior. We have to fundamentally change the design of the network to get the behavior we want. And we also have to fundamentally, I think, change the conversation, especially here in Austin, to bring in this notion of personal responsibility about if we have a drinking culture, then we have to behave appropriately. You can't cross I-35 on foot. It's not safe. And you can't drink to the point of oblivion and stumble into the streets or get behind a car or however you decide to travel. It's just not safe.
I wanted to talk a little bit about busing. You've seen a lot of efforts to expand or improve busing systems around the country. Houston just overhauled their busing system pretty dramatically. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what your cities are doing and considering. And Rebekah, Chicago is about to expand bus rapid transit.
We are finishing up construction of the Loop Link project downtown in the heart of our CBD, which is really redesigning some of the major east-west corridors that are linking the east and west sides of the Loop in Chicago, and some of the major transportation centers, commuter rail coming in on the west side, and job centers throughout the Loop. We'll be finishing the Loop Link, which is a facility that will provide dedicated bus lanes and enhanced boarding platforms for 6 CTA routes that are serving neighborhoods throughout the city, and will be dramatically improving the speed and reliability of those folks' commute. It's tens of thousands of people a day, and getting to work, getting to school. And so making that a more efficient and reliable trip. We're also, as part of that project, incorporating dedicated and protected bike facilities. So as we have a growing mode share in people biking for work, for recreation, and for trips, we're seeing increasing congestion and traffic safety issues downtown with biking. So those protected facilities are going to be critical. So the Complete Streets philosophy is imbued within this project in terms of creating more dedicated spaces for each of those modes, also a number of pedestrian safety improvements and other traffic signal investments to improve general vehicle flow as well. So that's one example of how CDOT is partnering with the Chicago Transit Authority to really look at how we can move buses more efficiently and effectively throughout our network. Almost 1 million people are taking the bus in Chicago every day, and it still outpaces the number of people using rail in Chicago, even though that's been growing faster than bus service. It's still bus service is still the backbone of how people are getting around our city, especially in the neighborhoods. So we're looking at how we can partner more with the CTA. We're doing a big transit signal priority investment on 2 of our major north-south arterials, Ashland and Western. That's rolling out beginning this winter, and that will affect another tens of thousands of people every day. So looking at the whole spectrum, Loop Link is on one end of that spectrum in terms of the scale and the density of where we're working and the dollars that are necessary to bring that change about. But it's going to be great in terms of proving the point that we're not building new streets, we're not widening our streets in the heart of our loop. So how are we going to leverage that space more efficiently and effectively so that everyone can move more safely, reliably, and efficiently? And we're really looking forward to setting that as an example so that we can do more investments in high-capacity transit throughout the city.
Else want to jump in?
Sure, I'll jump in. So Denver has been obviously building RTD, as building fast tracks, 120 plus miles of light rail and commuter rail, 4 lines which will open up this year, the first of which is out to the airport. So we're really excited about that, and I'm hopeful that that will affect my transportation behavior personally. There's also the thing that the city has been working on, like Rebekah had mentioned, we're not adding new roads, we're not adding new lanes in Denver, and so how are we thinking about increasing the efficiency of our roadways through transit? RTD, our Regional Transportation District, is the most important word in that is the first one, our regional, and Denver really is thinking about Denver. So one of the things we did is our strategic transportation plan, which goes back to 2008, we said, hey, we're really going to focus on person trip capacity rather than vehicles. So that really shifted the mindset in the city from a big picture perspective, and we've been talking about the role of transit and trying to understand the growth in the city that we were anticipating in 2008. We thought we'd be okay until about 2015. There's no way we could have imagined the surge of growth that we've had over the last 6 years. Denver has grown faster in the last 6 years than it has ever in its entire history, which is pretty incredible when you think about the gold rush and how many people came quickly to our area. So we're dealing with a lot of challenges right now and trying to understand what's our best way to do that. So because RTD is busy with fast tracks, we said, well, there's some things perhaps that we could do. So Colfax is it's RTD's #1 transit corridor. It's completely full, and we decided to take on, with the assistance from the Federal Transit Administration, an alternatives analysis to say what could we do on Colfax. And we are about to finish up our NEPA process with that. We've got a preferred preliminary alternative of bus rapid transit with a dedicated transit lane in both directions during the peak hour, so we're really excited about moving that. In the mayor's budget, we also have preliminary engineering funded, so we'll start continue to move through that process. But at the same time, we're all excited about that, and we're happy to be moving forward and hope to see actual bus rapid transit open on Colfax someday. Our city's growing so quickly, we can't go that slow, and so how do we do this more quickly? So the other thing that we'll be working on, we'll kick off early next year, is a citywide led Denver transit plan. So, but we, as a city, we're putting ourselves in sort of an awkward position. On Colfax, we put ourselves in the awkward position of leading a transit plan that also was 10 miles long, and not only in our jurisdiction, it went into our neighbors to the east in Aurora. So that was fun and interesting, and now we'll be leading a city-led transit plan with RTD, but it's really with us. And we're talking to our neighboring jurisdictions and also to the Colorado Department of Transportation, because many of our arterials are also state highways. And so how do we partner and work with them to think about how do we move people differently that in a way that they're not really used to, because they don't have the density. That's the only place we have that kind of density in the state is in Denver.
In Portland, we just completed a new light rail line And Crissy, you said something that I think is just so critical, is it's a regional project. And Robbie, you alluded to this in your opening remarks, that even though Austin is booming, it's really the region that is growing, and we're experiencing the same thing in the Portland metro region. So we just completed a light rail line, the Portland-Milwaukee light rail line that was funded regionally. And I just have to shamelessly talk about the Tilikum Crossing for a minute. It was just an in to talk about this beautiful bridge. I don't know if you guys have heard about it, but it's the first car-free bridge in North America. It's totally amazing. Our light rail line is going across it, streetcars, buses, light rail, bikes, and peds. So you should check it out. It's really cool. But we're currently just entering project development for a bus rapid transit project that is also going to be a regional project. It goes from Portland out to Gresham, so it's connecting from our city center in Portland all the way out to a community college in Gresham and going through a very busy corridor that passes a couple of community colleges. But it's making a connection in a new east-west location and connecting new it's really more about education than employment, but we're only in project development phase, and we hope to have it launched by 2020. But it's going to be some really interesting conversations that I see coming in the community around gentrification, displacement, and then congestion. So we have a lot of the communities are coming out and demanding of us to figure out a way that they can stay in their homes, businesses don't get displaced, because it's going through the lowest income neighborhood in the city of Portland, and there's everybody's hopes and dreams are being attached and fears to this project. So as the city, we're going to have to try to figure out how we can work with our communities along this route to ensure that the cultural communities get to stay intact, that small local businesses that Portland loves and thrives on can stay intact, but still make this really large regional connection for education and employment. And this is in the face of soaring population growth, soaring property tax prices, soaring real estate prices, and also increasing congestion that Portland hasn't ever seen. And so I think there's going to be some incredibly challenging conversations. I'd love to hear from anybody later on throughout this conference about how their communities have tackled those challenges and lessons learned, because I think we're going to be up against some challenging conversations.
Yeah, we certainly have a lot of those happening. We were talking before coming up here in San Francisco. But with regard to the transit system, particularly the bus system, about 8 or 9 years ago, we initiated something called the Transit Effectiveness Project, which took a comprehensive system-wide view of Muni, looked at all the data of where people were getting on and off, where development had happened or was happening, what travel patterns were, and from that developed a pretty comprehensive set of improvements in terms of service adjustments, service increases, route restructuring, and a capital program to do, as Rebekah said they're doing in Chicago, to reduce delays along the system from transit priority to bus bulbs, transit-only lanes, straightening out routes. And so we've identified a rapid network where we're focusing those investments, a few of which will be upgraded to full bus rapid transit, including our first one, which will break ground in a few months, which also happens to be on a state highway. But it's really a comprehensive approach because although we also have a rail system, the bus is more the backbone or carries a greater ridership. So we're making a lot of investments on the surface. We're in the midst of a 10% service increase over this 2-year budget cycle, with hopefully more to come in the next. And again, back to the very first question, trying to make it a more attractive way for people to get around the city, and by making it safer and particularly more reliable and a faster trip for folks to get across town or around the town. So we went to the voters last November, got approval for a $500 million general obligation bond that is largely focused on what we're calling Muni Forward, which is implementing those recommendations, and Vision Zero. And the good thing is, I think like Rebekah also said, in doing these upgrades along transit corridors, we are implementing a lot of the safety improvements as well. Some bike safety, but particularly pedestrian safety. So we're kind of knocking out a lot of the Vision Zero work plan as we're making these transit investments. So it's kind of a win-win from that perspective.
One thing I've been fascinated about with Austin is you're planning for these new toll lanes that are being built on the Mopac Highway to really improve the bus system. Can you talk a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Over the last 3 or 4 years, with our partners at Capital Metro, our local Metropolitan Transit Authority, both the city and their board adopted Project Connect, which is really a joint statement about a new regional transit system. And I think a lot of press, we went to the vote last year and lost a significant rail vote, which I think there's been a lot of focus on that. Oh my gosh, that the heart of Project Connect died. Well, in fact, it didn't. That same plan called for a transit corridor through town on our Guadalupe and Lavaca streets, and so that's now in place. We have Metro Rapid running both to the north and south. It's a version of BRT. And the express lanes are a very important part of that plan because those express lanes reach out into our suburban communities. They're variable toll lanes, so they'll be managed by how much demand is on those lanes. And from my perspective, what that allows us to do is assure that buses, which will run free, so you don't have to pay both your transit fare plus a toll fare, on those lanes will be able to provide a superior competitive alternative to the adjacent tax lanes, if you will. And so express lanes are very important. To the north, that's under construction right now. Many of us are starting to endure the construction congestion due to the tunneling so that facility can come into downtown, short tunnel that's being built. We are having active regional discussions about Mopac South, what the design should be, and I think we're quickly headed towards a successful definition of a build alternative that will provide express lanes down into our southwest part of Austin. And then, of course, I-35, which is sort of the big white elephant in the room or in town here, is headed for construction as early as 2020 here in Central Austin, with some of the early projects going to construction this year, letting for construction this year, and that initial effort was led by the city. And really, from the urban perspective, the importance of all those projects are about transit, getting people in and out of town. Capital Metro will undertake a route study this year, a reorganization of their route system, where I certainly hope will focus on commuters. How do we get more people into town? And so that's going to include park and ride facilities. We are having ongoing conversations with the Texas Department of Transportation as well as the Regional Mobility Authority that it's one thing to say that these lanes are going to be available for transit. It's a whole other thing to include that in your environmental statement and then make sure that that service exists either through direct financial support or building the support structures like park and ride facilities to make sure those vehicles are up and running. But as we shift into more and more of a focus on getting people to and from those 40, 50, 60,000 new employment opportunities in downtown Austin, we just built a new med school, and so we have just a growing medical device-oriented community. We need ways for folks to get to town. They can't all live downtown, even as we add residential downtown. And so those express lanes are really important. I think a lot of folks in town focus on the car opportunity that those provide, but I think we need to be focused on the transit opportunities that they provide. And so we're making sure that those provide direct transit into downtown. And then in coordination with that, we're also improving our signal system so our buses now can talk directly to our signal system, and we can increase the prioritization of transit through our system as we need to.
Ed, I'm guessing a lot of people in this room have been watching California's effort to build high-speed rail, and I was just curious, it's been such a moving target when it's going to start, when it's going to be completed. Do you plan for it, or how do you plan for something like that?
Yeah, so we definitely do plan for it. It's been a priority of the governor for quite a number of years now, and he's frankly fought a lot of opposition both at the state and federal level to get it going and keep it moving. The first contracts have been executed. It's underway. San Francisco is meant to be the northern terminus of the high-speed rail. that runs from LA to San Francisco. So we're absolutely planning for it in a couple of ways. One, the regional rail system called Caltrain that runs up through Silicon Valley up the peninsula to San Francisco is in the process of modernizing and electrifying. Right now they're old diesel cars, so the system is being modernized. There are grade separations going in. It's kind of a precursor to some of the upgrades that will be necessary for high-speed rail. In the city, we're building a new bus terminal that will connect directly to the Bay Bridge so that the folks coming in from the East Bay, their buses don't have to weave through city traffic to get to their destination. Underneath this new bus terminal, we've built the train box, which is where ultimately the high-speed rail will terminate. So that will require an extension from the current Northern Caltrain terminus. But what the city undertook a pretty significant land use planning effort to upzone the area around this transit facility to create the value that we're able to capture in order to build the facility that we'll need to then eventually extend the high-speed rail into what is kind of becoming the new center of downtown San Francisco. So there's actually a lot we're doing from a land use and transportation planning perspective to prepare for high-speed rail. The way that they're developing it from the state authority that was created to do so is kind of starting at the middle and then going south to LA and north to San Francisco. There's different folks in the north and south who are jockeying to get their parts done sooner. But I think we see it as tremendously important to the region, not just for maybe what's the more obvious better connections from downtown LA to downtown San Jose and downtown San Francisco, but I think it's about a third of the traffic at SFO, our airport, is just going to LA and back. And so with high-speed rail, we'll be able to free up a lot of capacity at our airport for other domestic and particularly international travel. So really an important part of the economy, not just of the city, but the region and the state. And so that's why we're making a lot of investment and preparations for it. I think there's a question of when it will happen, but I think there's not a question that it will happen.
I wonder if any of your other cities is high-speed rail even on your radar, long term?
In Chicago, there's a strong Midwest coalition supporting high-speed rail, but we're not as advanced in terms of planning and funding. There's a lot of open questions at the federal level in particular. I'll highlight one of the Mayor Manuel's big initiatives and priorities is really having a true transportation hub in our West Loop. I mentioned earlier that our Loop Link BRT project is going to be connecting that West Loop to the east side of the loop. And our Chicago Union Station is what's anchoring the commuter rail and Amtrak activity on the west side of the loop. But it's sorely lacking different intermodal connections, and there's a lot of congestion and capacity issues at Union Station. So we're really pleased that we have alignment. We're working closely with Amtrak and Metra, our commuter rail agency that is actually the majority of trips coming in and out of Union Station, and other regional transportation partners. The city led a master plan effort that created a vision for innovatively expanding capacity at that station that would also provide for capacity for high-speed rail. And so that's integrated into our thinking about intermodal connections. And the vision for the station is really expanding capacity there. We're serving over 120,000 people a day, but making real weather-protected and efficient linkages between your commuter rail, your local bus service, your local train service, so the CTA bus and rail, as well as your intercity trains and buses. And then connections to the airport ultimately, if you have that high-speed rail connection or other types of airport express connections. So we're excited that Chicago is finally poised to make a real West Loop transportation center, and then all those transit investments that I mentioned before that'll be anchoring that, and that'll link to the connections immediately downtown. So we are looking forward to the state and the federal transportation bills coming to fruition so that we can start to move forward these types of major transformative projects that are critical for our region's economy.
Anyone else want to add?
There's not as much happening in the in Denver proper, the state has been looking at how do you move folks up and down the I-25 corridor that could, extend to more of the region to the south into New Mexico. And we just had the Beyond Traffic US DOT event was in Denver earlier this week as well. The other piece is into the mountain corridor. So, one of the reasons why people move to Denver is because we have great weather and we have a great lifestyle and quality of life, and we have access to the mountains. But that access to the mountains along that I-70 corridor is challenging. So that's something that we've explored over the last few years as a community. It's really expensive. So the state is really trying to look right now at how do you make it better with lesser cost improvements, but still trying to keep that vision of rail into the mountains viable at some point in time.
Oh, and Rob, in Texas, the focus on high-speed rail has been Houston to Dallas. Is there anything on the horizon for Austin, you think?
Well, one thing I think about Central Texas and all of Texas, actually, is that I think high-speed rail is in our future, but we also need to remember we need a whole host of investments. High-speed rail will not provide the circulation and distribution, collection and distribution that our cities need. It certainly won't serve our regional needs as we think about from here to San Antonio or the I-35 corridor. And so there's a number of investments that need to be made in Texas, not just the high speed, but also the regional rail. And so, of course, Austin is part of the Lone Star Rail District and is striving to see move freight out of our central Austin area, perhaps to the east, where it's flatter and easier to provide freight tracks, and then reuse some of the existing routes into a regional commuter rail system. Again, that doesn't replace a future need for high-speed rail. I think the market here in Central Texas is great for high-speed rail. But we need to make a whole bunch of investments to get there, and I think high-speed rail is headed this way. And I would be remiss if I didn't say it, and it's not just about moving people. I think we need to start thinking about how do we move freight in the future, and Texas Transportation Institute, Texas A&M Transportation Institute, is doing some pretty interesting work that we're interested in freight shuttles and moving freight at high speed, because, again, our roads will not be able to handle everything we need over the long term.
Well, unfortunately, we are out of time, but I want to thank our panel here for a great conversation, and breakout sessions are next. Thank you all for being here.